They giggled as they dumped my homemade soup down the sink. The one I'd simmered all morning with fresh vegetables from my garden, just like my mama taught me. "Sorry, Grandma Rose," my daughter-in-law Kim said with a fake smile. "But we ordered burgers." I watched the orange broth swirl down the drain, carrying hours of love with it. Before we continue, first let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout-out in our next video. Today's special shout-out goes to Linda Ritchie from Portland, Oregon. Thank you for being part of our family. Now, let me tell you everything. The kids kept playing video games, not even looking up. I stood holding the empty pot, feeling something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't the first time they'd thrown away my cooking. Had been happening for months now. Every meal I made disappeared into garbage bags while they ate fast food on paper plates. They said my cooking was too old-fashioned and weird. My grandson Tyler once held his nose when I opened a jar of pickles I'd made. "Gross, it smells like old people food," he laughed. His little brother Jake copied him, pinching his nose too. Kim just shrugged like boys will be boys. But I remembered when Tyler was small, how he used to help me stir pots and lick wooden spoons. I carried the empty pot back to my small room in the back of their house. Yes, their house now. I'd sold my beautiful home 2 years ago when my husband Frank died. My son David said I shouldn't live alone anymore. "Come stay with us, Mom," he'd said. "We'll take care of you." But taking care seemed to mean storing me in the spare room like an old suitcase. The walls were thin. I could hear them talking about me at night. Kim's voice always got sharp when she mentioned the grocery money I gave them each month. Frank would have known what to do. He never let anyone treat me poorly, not even his own mother when she tried to boss me around. "Rose is my wife," he'd say firmly. "She deserves respect." But Frank was gone now, buried under the oak tree in Riverside Cemetery. I visited his grave every week until Kim said the gas money was too expensive. Now I just talked to his picture by my bed. The same picture where his eyes still sparkled with mischief, where his smile still made me feel brave. I sat on my narrow bed and pulled out the folder I kept hidden under my sweaters. Inside were important papers, including the deed to this house. The deed Kim and David didn't know about. You see, when I sold my old house, I used that money to buy this one for them. The bank papers were all in my name because David's credit wasn't good enough. I'd planned to surprise them later by signing it over. But surprises work both ways, and they'd forgotten who really owned the roof over their heads. That night, I lay awake listening to them laugh in the living room. They were watching some comedy show, the volume turned up loud like I didn't exist. My small window faced the backyard where my tomato plants grew in pots. I'd asked to plant a proper garden, but Kim said it would mess up the lawn. So I grew what I could in containers, just like I was learning to live in the small spaces they gave me. But even container plants need good soil to grow strong roots. The next morning I woke up before everyone else. I always did. Old habits from 50 years of making Frank's coffee before he left for the factory. I put on my best blue dress, the one with tiny flowers that Frank said made my eyes shine. I brushed my silver hair until it gleamed and pinned it back with the pearl clips my mother gave me. Today felt different somehow. Important. Like when you know a storm is coming by how still the air gets. I made myself tea and toast, eating slowly while the house slept around me. By the time David stumbled to the kitchen for coffee, I was already dressed and ready. "Going somewhere, Mom?" he asked, not really interested. His hair stuck up funny and his pajama shirt had a stain. "Yes, dear," I said simply. "I have some business to handle." He nodded and grabbed a donut from the box Kim bought instead of eating my homemade biscuits. I left quietly, walking to the bus stop with my purse and the folder tucked safely inside. The morning air smelled like rain and new possibilities. The lawyer's office sat downtown in a tall building with glass windows that reflected the clouds. I'd found Mr. Martinez's name in the phone book when I first moved here, thinking I might need legal help someday. His secretary, a kind woman with gray streaks in her hair, smiled when I walked in. "Mrs. Peterson, right on time," she said. I'd made the appointment 3 weeks ago, right after Kim laughed when I asked if I could hang my wedding picture in the hallway. "It doesn't match our style," she'd said. Mr. Martinez was younger than my David, but had gentle eyes behind wire glasses. "You mentioned wanting to discuss property matters," he said, opening a fresh file. I handed him the deed, watching his eyebrows raise as he read. "This house is entirely in your name," he confirmed. "Your son and his family are living there as your guests." His voice was careful, professional. "What exactly would you like to do?" I took a deep breath, feeling Frank's strength flow through me. "I want them out," I said quietly but firmly. He explained the process step by step. Since they weren't paying rent and had no lease, they were what lawyers call tenants at will. I could ask them to leave any time with proper notice. 30 days was standard and legal. He asked if I was sure if maybe there was another way. I thought about Tyler holding his nose at my pickles. About Kim rolling her eyes at my stories. About David never standing up for me anymore. "I'm sure," I said. "Please prepare the papers." My voice didn't shake. Not even once. After the lawyer, I walked to the bank where I'd opened an account when Frank died. The teller knew me by name now. "Good morning, Mrs. Peterson," she chirped. "What can I help you with today?" I explained what I needed. David had been using my debit card to buy groceries and pay bills. That was fine when I thought he was caring for me. But now I saw it differently. He was spending my money while treating me like a burden. The teller helped me get a new card with just my name on it. I stopped at the small cafe near the bank and ordered a piece of apple pie. Real homemade pie, not the frozen kind Kim bought. The waitress, an older lady like me, brought it with fresh whipped cream. "This reminds me of my grandmother's baking," she said kindly. "She always said love was the secret ingredient." I ate slowly, savoring each bite while people hurried past the window. For the first time in months, I felt like I belonged somewhere, even if it was just a cafe booth with cracked vinyl seats. When I got home, Kim was vacuuming around my chair in the living room. She'd moved it again, pushed into a corner behind a tall plant. "There you are," she said over the vacuum noise. "We didn't know where you went." But her tone said she hadn't. That evening at dinner they ordered pizza again. 5 boxes stacked on the counter, grease already seeping through cardboard. Tyler grabbed 3 slices before anyone else sat down. "Grandma Rose, you want some?" Jake asked, but Kim quickly said, "She probably wants to eat her own food. You know how she is." They all nodded like I wasn't sitting right there. Like my hearing had died with Frank. I ate a small salad in the kitchen while they crowded around the TV, laughing at cartoons between bites of melted cheese and pepperoni. Later that night I heard Kim talking to her sister on the phone. She thought I was asleep, but thin walls carry voices like water carries boats. "She's getting stranger every day," Kim whispered. "Always cooking weird old-fashioned stuff nobody wants. And she follows me around like a lost puppy." Her sister laughed on the other end. "At least she pays for groceries," Kim added. "Though I wish she'd just give us the money instead of trying to be helpful." The word helpful sounded like a curse in her mouth. I lay in bed staring at Frank's picture. His eyes seemed to understand everything without me saying a word. We'd been married 42 years. He knew my thoughts before I spoke them, could tell my mood by how I buttered his morning toast. "They don't see me anymore," I whispered to the photo. "I'm like a ghost in my own house." But ghosts, I realized, can walk through walls and appear when you least expect them. Maybe it was time to remind them that some spirits refuse to be ignored. The eviction papers arrived the next Friday in a crisp white envelope. Kim signed for them while I watched from the kitchen window. Her face went pale as she read, then flushed bright red. "David," she screamed. "David, get home now." Her hands shook as she dialed his work number. I could hear her voice from my room, high and panicked. "Your mother is trying to kick us out. She's lost her mind." But I hadn't lost anything. For the first time in 2 years I'd found something precious. My backbone. David's truck squealed into the driveway 20 minutes later. I heard the front door slam, heard Kim's voice spilling over with angry words. 30 days notice. She can't do this to us. We're family. David's voice was quieter but just as upset. Mom must be confused. Old people get mixed up about legal stuff. They talked about me like I was already gone, like age had stolen my brain along with my place at their table. I sat calmly in my chair, hands folded, waiting. Soon they'd learn that 75 years of life had taught me exactly what I was doing. The knock on my door was sharp, impatient. David stood there holding the papers, Kim right behind him with tears in her eyes. Real tears or fake ones, I couldn't tell anymore. "Mom, what is this about?" David asked. His voice was tight like when he was little and knew he was in trouble. "It's about respect," I said simply. "Or the lack of it." Kim pushed forward. "We've been taking care of you, giving you a home when you had nowhere else to go." Her voice cracked on the last words. "Taking care of me." I stood up slowly, feeling taller than I had in months. "Is that what you call it when you throw away my cooking? When you move my chair so guests won't see me? When you talk about me like I'm not here?" David opened his mouth but no words came out. "You wanted my money but not me," I continued. "Well, the money comes with the person who earned it. And that person owns this house." The silence stretched between us like a bridge neither side wanted to cross. Kim's tears turned angry. "This is ridiculous. You can't just throw your own family out on the street." But I wasn't throwing them anywhere. I was simply taking back what was mine. 30 days, I repeated. "The papers explain everything." David finally found his voice. "Mom, please. Let's talk about this. Maybe we can work something out." But talking required listening, and they'd stopped hearing me long ago. "The time for talking was before you treated me like furniture," I said. "Now it's time for moving." That night the house felt different. Heavier somehow, like storm clouds pressing down on the roof. Kim stayed on the phone with friends and family, her voice carrying through the walls. "She's being impossible. Completely unreasonable. We don't know what to do." But I knew exactly what they'd do. They'd look for sympathy, play the victim, paint me as a cruel old woman. Let them. I'd lived long enough to know that sometimes kindness looks mean to people who've forgotten how to earn it. David tried a different approach the next morning. He made me coffee, adding cream the way Frank used to, and sat across from me at the small table in my room. "Mom, I know we haven't been perfect," he began carefully. "But kicking us out isn't the answer. Tyler and Jake need stability. Kim's trying her best." I sipped the coffee. It was good but 20 years too late. "Tyler holds his nose when I cook," I said. "Jake calls my food gross. Kim throws away everything I make. Is that the stability you want them to learn?" He had no answer for that. How could he? I'd watched my grandsons learn that older people don't matter, that their wisdom is worthless, that love can be thrown in the garbage along with homemade soup. "They're just kids, Mom," he finally said. "Kids learn from adults," I replied. "What exactly are you teaching them about how to treat family?" His shoulders sagged. For a moment, I saw the little boy who used to climb into my lap when thunderstorms scared him. But that boy had grown into a man who chose silence over defending his mother. The days crawled by like injured animals. Kim stopped speaking to me entirely, walking past my chair as if I were invisible. The boys whispered when they saw me, their eyes wide with confusion. David moved through the house like a sleepwalker, avoiding my gaze. I felt no joy in their distress, but I felt no guilt either. Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their choices. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is stop enabling cruelty, even when it's wrapped in family ties. I spent my afternoons in the backyard with my potted tomatoes, talking to them like old friends. Plants don't argue or roll their eyes. They just grow toward the light when you give them what they need. "You understand, don't you?" I asked the biggest tomato plant. Its fruit was almost ready, red and heavy on the vine. I'd grown it from seed, just like I'd grown David from a baby. But somehow, unlike my tomatoes, my son had forgotten his roots. 2 weeks into the note, "Fine," she snapped, standing up so fast her chair scraped the floor. "Be alone then. See how you like it when you're sitting in this house by yourself with nobody to care about you." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. But she was wrong about one thing. I wouldn't be alone. I'd have my dignity back. I'd have my kitchen back. I'd have the freedom to cook what I wanted, sit where I chose, and exist without apology. Sometimes alone is better than lonely in a crowd. David made one last attempt the night before they were supposed to leave. He knocked softly and came in carrying a photo album I'd forgotten about. Pictures of his childhood, birthday parties, Christmas mornings when Frank was alive and our house felt like home. "Remember this?" he asked, pointing to a picture of 5-year-old David covered in flour after helping me bake cookies. "You taught me everything about being a family." His voice was thick with tears he'd been holding back for weeks. I remembered teaching him to crack eggs without getting shells in the bowl. I remembered bandaging his scraped knees and reading bedtime stories until my voice was hoarse. I remembered being so proud when he graduated high school, married Kim, had babies of his own. "I remember teaching you to be kind," I said softly. "I remember teaching you to respect your elders. What happened to those lessons?" He closed the photo album with shaking hands. "I don't know, Mom. I honestly don't know." The moving truck came at dawn. I watched from my window as they loaded furniture, boxes of clothes, Tyler's gaming chair, Jake's bike. The boys looked confused and sad, not understanding why their world was being packed into cardboard. Part of me wanted to run outside and say it was all a mistake, that they could stay. But then I remembered Tyler holding his nose at my cooking. I remembered Kim's fake smiles and eye rolls. I remembered being invisible at my own dinner table. Kim wouldn't look at me as she carried out her clothes. David paused at my door one last time, suitcase in hand. "Mom, I want you to know. I do love you. I always have." His voice was small, broken. "I love you too," I replied, and I meant it. But love without respect isn't enough anymore. He nodded slowly, understanding finally flickering in his eyes. "Maybe someday." He started. "Maybe," I agreed. "But first you need to remember who raised you to be better than this." After they left, the house felt enormous and quiet. I walked through each room, touching walls that were mine again, opening windows to let fresh air chase away the lingering smell of fast food and disappointment. In the kitchen, I found one of Tyler's action figures forgotten behind the toaster. For a moment I almost cried. But then I remembered that little boys who learn to disrespect their grandmothers grow up to be men who forget where they came from. I put the toy in a box for when he was ready to visit properly. That evening I cooked for myself. Real food made with love and patience. Chicken soup with vegetables from my garden pots, biscuits from my mother's recipe, apple pie from fruit I'd picked myself. The kitchen filled with smells that spoke of home, of tradition, of meals made by hands that cared. I set one place at the table, lit a candle, and ate slowly. Each bite tasted like freedom. Each swallow felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd lost somewhere along the way. Later I called my sister Martha, who lived 3 states away. "You did what?" she gasped when I told her about the eviction. But as I explained everything, her tone changed from shock to understanding to pride. "Good for you, Rose," she said firmly. "Frank would be proud. You can't let people walk all over you just because they're family. Sometimes family needs to learn the hardest lessons of all." We talked for an hour, laughing about old memories and making plans for her to visit next month. The next few weeks passed quietly. I established new routines, small pleasures I'd forgotten I enjoyed. Morning coffee on the back porch with my tomato plants. Afternoon naps without tiptoeing around other people's schedules. Evening TV shows I actually wanted to watch, not cartoons chosen by children who'd forgotten their manners. I planted new flowers in pots, bright marigolds that Frank always said matched my sunny spirit. Slowly, I began to feel like myself again instead of an unwanted ghost. A month after they left, David called. His voice was different, smaller somehow. "Mom, we're living in a 2-bedroom apartment now. As cram. Kim's working at the grocery store. Money's really tight." He paused, waiting for me to offer help. When I didn't, he continued. "The boys ask about you. Tyler found some old photos of you teaching him to make cookies." He cried. My heart ached, but I stayed strong. "Crying is good," I said. "It means he's starting to remember what he lost. Could we maybe visit sometime?" David asked carefully. "I've been thinking about what you said. About respect. You were right, Mom. I let them treat you badly because it was easier than dealing with the conflict." His voice cracked. "I failed you. Failed Dad. I failed my own kids by not teaching them better." These were the words I'd been waiting to hear for 2 years. Not apologies about stress or excuses about money, but real understanding of what had been broken and who had broken it. "Visiting might be possible," I said slowly. "But things would have to be different. No more throwing away my cooking. No more treating me like I'm invisible. No more letting the boys act like my love is something to laugh at." David was quiet for a long moment. "I understand," he finally said. "It might take time to undo the damage we did. But I want to try. We all do." I looked at Frank's picture on the mantel. His eyes seemed to approve. "Second chances are precious things, but they have to be earned." I agreed to one Sunday dinner here at my house with my cooking and my rules. David would have to explain to Kim and the boys that Grandma Rose was not just an old lady in the corner, but the woman who owned the roof they'd taken for granted. They would eat what I made or go hungry. They would say please and thank you. They would remember that I was a person worthy of basic respect. If they couldn't manage that, they could leave. My house, my rules, my dignity. The Sunday they came for dinner, Tyler knocked on my door holding a drawing he'd made at school. It showed a stick-figure grandmother with gray hair and a big smile, cooking at a stove while a little boy watched. "I made this for you, Grandma Rose," he said quietly. "I'm sorry I was mean about your food. I forgot that you make it because you love us." His small hand slipped into mine, trusting and warm. Sometimes forgiveness starts with a child's honest heart. Kim looked uncomfortable but made an effort to compliment the soup I'd made. "This is really good, Rose," she said, and for once her voice held no sarcasm. Jake asked for seconds without being reminded to say please. David helped clear dishes without being asked. It wasn't perfect, but it was a big. As they prepared to leave, David pulled me aside. "Thank you for giving us another chance," he said. "I know we don't deserve it." I looked at my son, this man I'd raised to be better than he'd been, and saw hope flickering in his eyes. "Everyone deserves a chance to do better," I told him. "But chances aren't unlimited. Remember that." He nodded solemnly. "I will, Mom. I promise." And for the first time in years, his promise felt like something I could believe in. They visit most Sundays now, and the change is like watching flowers bloom after a long winter. Tyler helps me stir pots and asks questions about family recipes. Jake sets the table without complaining. Kim brings ingredients sometimes and asks to learn my biscuit recipe. David stands up for me when the boys forget their manners, reminding them that respect isn't optional in Grandma's house. It's not the same as before, but it's better. It's built on honesty instead of obligation. Sometimes at night, I sit on the back porch with my tomato plants and think about the journey that brought me here. About losing Frank, losing myself, then finding my strength again in an eviction notice signed with my own hand. People think old women are weak, helpless, forgotten. They think we'll accept scraps of attention and be grateful. But we raised the people who now dismiss us. We built the homes they take for granted. We earned the right to demand better. Martha visits often now, staying in the guest room that used to be mine when I lived like a refugee in my own house. We cook together, sharing stories and recipes passed down through generations. She brings photo albums from our childhood, reminding me of the strong women who raised us. "Grandma Peterson would be proud," she says, looking at my thriving garden pots. She taught us that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's just enabling. The house feels like home again. Walls that echo with laughter instead of arguments. A kitchen that smells of homemade bread instead of takeout containers. Windows that let in light instead of hiding shameful behavior. I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable cruelty. Sometimes caring for family means teaching them consequences. Sometimes you have to lose people to help them find their way back to who they're supposed to be. Tyler brought his school friends over last week, proudly introducing me as his grandma who makes the best cookies in town. He stood tall when he said it, no embarrassment in his voice. Jake asked to invite his friend for Sunday dinner so he could show off my famous chicken and dumplings. These are the grandchildren I remember, the ones I helped shape before distance and disrespect clouded their hearts. Teaching them to value their elders taught them to value themselves. David calls every few days now, not asking for money but just to talk. He tells me about work challenges and asks for advice about raising his boys. I want them to grow up knowing how to treat people with dignity, he said recently. Especially the people who love them most. It's a conversation we should have had years ago, but healing doesn't follow convenient timelines. Comes when people are finally ready to face the truth about themselves. Kim and I will never be best friends, but we've found a way to coexist with mutual respect. She admits now that she was jealous of my relationship with the boys, threatened by their love for their grandmother. I thought I had to compete with you, she confessed one Sunday. I didn't understand that there's room for everyone to be loved. Insecurity makes people cruel sometimes, but understanding doesn't excuse the cruelty. Just explains why forgiveness is possible. The neighbors have noticed the change too. Mrs. Collins from next door often stops by for coffee and conversation. You look different, she said recently. Stronger somehow. I suppose standing up for yourself does that to a person. It reminds you that you matter, that your feelings count, that your worth doesn't depend on how convenient you are for other people. Age might slow my body, but it doesn't diminish my right to be treated with dignity. I keep the eviction papers in a frame on my mantel now, right next to Frank's picture. Not as a threat but as a reminder. A reminder that love without respect is hollow. That family ties don't justify cruel treatment. That sometimes the people who claim to care about you most are the ones who need the strongest boundaries. Those papers represent the day I chose myself, the day I remembered I was worth fighting for. Frank would understand. He always said I was stronger than I knew, braver than I believed. You've got steel in your spine, Rose. He'd tell me when life got difficult. Don't let anyone convince you to bend so far you break. I'd forgotten that steel for a while, buried under years of trying to keep peace by sacrificing pieces of myself. But steel doesn't rust away. It just needs polishing to shine again. The tomato plants are thriving now in their bigger pots. I've given them room to grow, just like I've given myself room to exist without apology. The fruit is red and heavy, perfect for the soup I'll make this Sunday when my family comes to visit. Real family this time, people who understand that sharing a meal is about more than filling your stomach. It's about sharing love, respect, and the understanding that everyone at the table matters. Young people often ask me for advice about dealing with difficult family members. How do you know when to fight and when to let go? They wonder. The answer isn't simple because every situation is different. But I tell them this. You teach people how to treat you by what you accept. If you accept cruelty, you get more cruelty. If you demand respect, you might lose some relationships, but the ones that remain will be built on solid ground. I'm writing my story down now, keeping a journal for my grandsons to read when they're older. I want them to understand what happened during those difficult years, why their grandmother had to make such a hard choice. I want them to know that standing up for yourself isn't mean or selfish. It's necessary. It's how you teach the world that your life has value, that your feelings matter, that you deserve better than scraps of attention and leftover love. The journal entries about the eviction are hard to write, but necessary. I don't want to paint David and Kim as villains because they're not. They're just people who forgot how to see past their own needs, who took my love for granted until it almost disappeared. People make mistakes, even terrible ones that hurt the people they claim to care about. The important thing is learning from those mistakes and choosing to do better. Martha brought her own story to share last week. She'd had to set boundaries with her daughter Sarah, who'd been using guilt trips to manipulate money from her parents. It nearly destroyed our relationship, Martha admitted. But saving it required me to stop enabling the behavior I was complaining about. We're not the only older women who've had to choose between keeping peace and keeping our dignity. Sometimes love requires tough choices that feel mean in the moment. The hardest part wasn't signing the eviction papers or watching them pack their belongings. It was the weeks after they left when doubt crept in like cold air through window cracks. Had I been too harsh? Too quick to act? Should I have tried talking to them more first? But then I'd remember Tyler holding his nose at my cooking, Kim's eye rolls when I spoke, David's silence when I needed his support. Doubt is just fear wearing a fancy outfit. I've learned that guilt is often a sign you're moving in the right direction. When you start standing up for yourself after years of accepting poor treatment, the people benefiting from your silence will try to make you feel guilty for changing the rules. They'll call you selfish, unreasonable, cruel. But guilt about setting healthy boundaries is misplaced guilt. The real guilt belongs to people who take advantage of your kindness and then act surprised when you finally say enough. The Sunday dinners have become something we all look forward to now. I plan menus during the week, shop for fresh ingredients, and set the table with care. Not because I have to, but because I want to. There's a difference between cooking from obligation and cooking from joy. The meals taste better when they're seasoned with respect instead of resentment. Last month, Tyler asked if he could bring his girlfriend to Sunday dinner. I want her to meet you properly, Grandma Rose, he said. I want her to taste your famous pot roast. The pride in his voice made my heart sing. This is the boy who used to hold his nose at my cooking, now bragging about it to his friends. Children can change when the adults around them model better behavior. Growth is possible at any age. Jake has started calling me during the week just to chat. Yesterday he told me about a school project on family history. Can you tell me stories about great-grandpa Frank? He asked. And about your parents? I want to write about where we come from. These conversations never happened when I was treated like an inconvenience. Respect opens doors that indifference keeps locked. Heritage flows both ways when families remember how to listen. The eviction taught us all lessons we needed to learn. David learned that protecting his mother wasn't optional, even when it made his life more complicated. Kim learned that kindness isn't weakness and cruelty isn't strength. The boys learned that every person deserves dignity, especially the ones who've loved you longest. I learned that standing up for yourself doesn't make you selfish, makes you whole. People in town sometimes ask about the family trouble from a few years back. Small towns remember everything, and evicting your own son made headlines in local gossip circles. Wasn't that a bit extreme? They wonder. I tell them simply, sometimes extreme problems require extreme solutions. Most nod in understanding. The ones who don't probably haven't learned yet that being family doesn't excuse being cruel. I keep Frank's picture on the kitchen windowsill now, where he can watch me cook. His smile still makes me feel brave on days when doubt creeps in. You did right, Rose, I imagine him saying. Our boy needed to remember who raised him. Frank never believed in enabling bad behavior, even from people we loved. Love without boundaries isn't protection. It's permission to keep hurting you. The house has new memories now, better ones. Laughter that includes everyone. Meals where every voice matters. Conversations that bridge generations instead of creating walls between them. The rooms that once felt heavy with resentment now feel light with possibility. Home isn't just where your belongings are. It's where your heart feels safe to be itself. Martha says I inspire her to be braver with her own family challenges. Watching you stand up for yourself gave me permission to do the same, she tells me. We older women often suffer in silence, thinking that's what love looks like. But silent suffering teaches the wrong lessons. It tells our families that our pain doesn't matter, that their convenience is more important than our dignity. David brought me flowers last Sunday, daisies from his own garden. "Mom, I want you to know how sorry I am for those years," he said quietly. "I lost sight of what really mattered. I won't make that mistake again." Apologies mean more when they come with changed behavior. Words are easy. Actions take courage. The flowers were beautiful, but his respect for my cooking meant more. Kim asked to borrow my recipe book last week. "I want to learn to cook the way you do," she said. "With love instead of convenience." The book is handwritten, passed down from my mother and grandmother, stained with decades of use. Sharing those recipes feels like passing on more than ingredients. It's sharing the understanding that feeding people is an act of love that deserves appreciation. I've started volunteering at the senior center, helping other older people navigate family conflicts. So many stories echo mine. Adult children who take without giving. Families who mistake silence for consent. Grandparents treated like burdens instead of blessings. You have the right to demand better, I tell them. Age doesn't disqualify you from dignity. Some listen. Some aren't ready yet. The garden has expanded beyond my pots now. David and the boys built me raised beds in the backyard, filled with rich soil and planted with vegetables I choose. Tyler helps me weed on Sundays while Jake waters the seedlings. "This is way better than video games," Tyler said last week, dirt under his fingernails and sunshine on his face. Working together builds bonds that can't be manufactured. Sometimes neighbors stop by to admire the garden and stay for tea. Word has spread about my Sunday dinners and the family healing that happened around my table. "How did you find the courage?" they ask. I tell them about Frank's strength, about steel spines that don't rust, about the difference between keeping peace and keeping dignity. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite the fear. The eviction papers are faded now in their frame, but their message remains clear. Never again will I accept cruelty disguised as family love. Never again will I shrink myself to fit other people's convenience. Never again will I let anyone convince me that my needs don't matter just because I've lived longer than they have. Those papers represent the day I chose myself over their comfort. Tyler graduated high school last month with honors. In his speech, he thanked his family, mentioning me specifically. My grandma Rose taught me that respect isn't given because of age, but because of character. She showed me that standing up for yourself isn't mean, it's necessary. The auditorium was quiet during those words. Truth has a way of cutting through noise and touching hearts. Jake talks about becoming a chef now, inspired by our cooking sessions. "I want to make food that makes people happy like yours does, Grandma," he tells me. His interest isn't just about ingredients and techniques. It's about understanding that the house feels complete now in ways it never did when it was full of resentment. Every room has purpose. Every meal has meaning. Every conversation matters. This is what home should feel like. A place where everyone belongs, where voices are heard, where love is expressed through actions rather than just words. It took losing them to teach them how to find me again. Frank's spirit lives on in the lessons his family finally learned. He always said that love should make people better, not enable them to be worse. He believed in accountability wrapped in compassion, in second chances earned through changed behavior. The man who taught me to stand tall would be proud of the woman I became when I finally remembered his lessons. I tell my story not for sympathy but for strength. For other women who feel invisible in their own homes. For families who've forgotten that love requires respect to survive. For anyone who needs permission to value themselves enough to demand better treatment. Your worth doesn't diminish with age. Your voice doesn't become less important because it speaks from experience rather than ignorance. The tomato plants produced more fruit than I could use, so I shared the harvest with neighbors and friends. Just like the lessons learned from my difficult journey, abundance is meant to be shared. Pain can become wisdom when it's offered to help others avoid similar hurt. Stories have power to heal both the teller and the listener. David keeps a picture of that first Sunday dinner after the eviction on his refrigerator. All of us around the table, smiling genuinely for the first time in years. I want to remember how good it felt to get our family back, he says. But we didn't get our family back. We built a new one, stronger and more honest than the one that was broken by taking love for granted. The eviction notice that once seemed so harsh now feels like the greatest gift I ever gave my family. It forced us all to examine what we'd become and choose what we wanted to be instead. Sometimes destruction is necessary before reconstruction can begin. Sometimes you have to tear down walls to build bridges. Martha visits every month now, and we've started planning a family reunion for next summer. Let's invite everyone, she suggests. Show them what real family looks like. The reunion will be held here, in my house, with my cooking and my rules. Rules about respect, kindness, and remembering that every person at the table has value regardless of age. Young couples sometimes ask me for marriage advice, having heard about our family's journey from conflict to healing. How do you balance keeping peace with standing up for yourself? They wonder. I tell them that real peace doesn't come from avoiding conflict. It comes from resolving conflict with honesty, respect, and the understanding that some battles are worth fighting when love is at stake. The recipe box that Kim wanted to borrow has become a bridge between us. We cook together sometimes, her hands learning the motions my mother taught me decades ago. I never understood that cooking could be a love language, she admits. I thought it was just another chore. Understanding changes everything when it comes from genuine desire to do better. I'm writing letters to my grandsons now, to be opened when they have families of their own. Letters about the importance of honoring the people who shaped them. About treating their parents and grandparents with dignity even when it's inconvenient. About remembering that everyone gets old eventually, and how they treat older people today determines how they'll be treated tomorrow. The neighbors have started calling me the eviction lady, with affection rather than judgment. They've heard the whole story now, seen the transformation in my family, witnessed the power of standing firm when it matters most. You showed us all that love doesn't mean being a doormat, Mrs. Collins said recently. Sometimes the hardest lessons teach the most valuable truths. Frank's favorite chair sits by the window now, and sometimes I imagine him there, watching our Sunday dinners with approval. He always believed that family should be a source of strength, not stress. He'd be proud of how we fought our way back to each other, how we learned that love without respect is just empty words dressed up in good intentions. The house will stay in the family when I'm gone, but with clear instructions about how it should be used. No one will live here rent-free without contributing. No one will take the gift of home for granted again. The deed will pass to David, but with conditions that protect future generations from forgetting these hard-learned lessons about respect and gratitude. Tyler's girlfriend fits into our family perfectly, bringing flowers for the table and offering to help with dishes. She comes from a family that taught her to honor her elders, and Tyler chose well. I can see where Tyler gets his kindness, she told me recently. Family traits skip generations sometimes, but they always resurface when love is real. The story of our eviction and reconciliation has spread beyond our small town. A local newspaper wrote about it, calling it a lesson in love and boundaries. People from other states have written letters sharing their own family struggles. Pain is universal, but so is the possibility of healing when people choose growth over comfort. I keep the original eviction papers as a reminder, but I've also framed the first thank you note Tyler wrote me after we reconciled. Dear Grandma Rose, it reads, thank you for not giving up on us even when we gave up on you. Thank you for teaching us that love should make us better people. Children's honesty cuts straight to the heart of truth. The Sunday dinners continue, but they've evolved into something richer than just meals. They're celebrations of connection, lessons in respect, reminders that family is something you create through daily choices rather than something you inherit automatically. The table holds more than food now. It holds hope, healing, and the hard-won wisdom that comes from fighting for what matters. Martha and I often laugh about how dramatic the eviction seemed at the time. You could have won an Oscar for that performance, she teases. But it wasn't a performance. It was survival. It was a woman who'd spent decades giving and giving, finally learning that receiving respect wasn't too much to ask. Sometimes drama is just truth finally finding its voice. The garden produces enough vegetables now to share with the food bank downtown. Tyler and Jake help me harvest and deliver the surplus, learning that abundance carries responsibility to help others. "This feels good, Grandma," Jake said last week, handing bags of tomatoes to grateful families. Generosity taught through example creates generous hearts. David has become protective of my time and energy now, screening visitors and making sure I'm not overwhelmed by people wanting to hear the eviction story. "Mom's been through enough," he tells persistent reporters. The house that once felt like a prison now feels like a sanctuary. Every room holds memories of healing rather than hurt. The kitchen where my food was once thrown away now hosts cooking lessons. The dining room where I was excluded now welcomes 3 generations around its table. Physical spaces hold emotional energy, and ours has been transformed. Frank's picture smiles down on all of this healing, and I swear sometimes I feel his approval like sunshine through the windows. He always said that family was worth fighting for, but fighting meant standing up for what's right, not just keeping false peace. The fight I waged with that eviction notice was really a fight for love itself. I'm planning to write a book about this journey, not as revenge against my family, but as a guide for others facing similar struggles. Tentatively titled, "The Eviction Notice That Saved My Family," it will explore the difference between enabling and loving, between keeping peace and keeping dignity. Every family has its struggles, but not every family finds its way home. They laughed as they tossed my dinner in the trash, thinking my love was disposable. But love isn't garbage to be thrown away when it becomes inconvenient. Love is a foundation that demands respect to remain strong. When I handed them that eviction notice, I wasn't ending our relationship. I was saving it. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable the destruction of love itself. Today we feast together on meals seasoned with respect, and nobody laughs anymore except in joy.